Here's one towards the goal. That's going to be gloved by Travis Ridgen. Well, this is more like it.
This is Slangin' the Biscuit. Here's Travis Ridgen and Dave Wheeler.
Ladies and gentlemen, lads and ladies, welcome back inside the Slinging the Biscuit summer fall, now trickling into the winter interview series. Today's guest is the pride of Northern Alberta, 400 kilometers north of Edmonton. Over 100 Division I games played for the University of Miami. That's in Ohio. Over 700 pro games played. He spent 8 years coaching the Coventry Blaze. He gave him the old Bill Belichick, I'm taking my shit, I can do better. Now he's with the Nottingham Panthers, gave him a little bit of Ocho. Now he's giving him a little bit of Cinco. Welcome to the show, head coach Danny Stewart. That's not Jason Statham's twin brother either.
That's a hell of an intro. Love it. Thank you for having me.
Well, and listen, we'd be remiss if we didn't start off by talking about that championship run with the Nottingham Panthers last year, watching the highlights. What did we say, Trav, on the way here? A game that was won 3 times?
Yep.
Yeah, that was an emotional one. It was to feel like you won a championship and then feel you lost it and then win it again. That was
Can you explain the situation? So for those that don't understand, championship game, overtime, what happens?
So we score on a power play, quick play to the net. Our guy goes into the crease. So a little bit of contact, but essentially the refs reviewed it, no goal, because he went into the crease voluntarily before the contact, and then he impeded the goalie, which at the time, I was a little bit unsure. You're in the heat of the moment, but, when you have time to reflect and watch it through and through, then, probably the right call. But so then everyone celebrated like we had won it. So everyone's got to pick up all their shit again, grab their gloves, sticks, put their helmets back on, go again. And then, God, man, I can't remember how much, maybe a period later, they then score. Same kind of play. Guy goes to the net, play to the net. And just kind of as our goalie was going post to post, kind of clipped his skate. Puck goes in, so they review it. We felt it was a similar type play from the explanation we got. So they review it. Cardiff had celebrated like they had won it, gloves off, champagne moments. The league video crews are on the ice videoing everybody. They review it, call it back again. So we got to pick up our stuff again and go again. And then I think the next period, the double OT, we scored to win it.
It's one of those double-edged swords because, to use an old cliche in sports broadcasting, you couldn't write a script like that. It's a double-edged sword because it got attention around the world in the hockey world to go, you're not going to believe how this championship game went. But at the same time, a lot of people going, well, that would only happen over in England. How do you manage both sides of that?
Yeah, there's some perceptions that are so false about our league. It's crazy. It's such a well-run league now. And, if you had talked to me in 2006 when I first came over, you maybe had reason to debate that. But now it's such a good league and it's well ran. These were just freak plays. And you know what? They were both the right calls. I have to say, in reflection and then talking to even people in North America, what the justification was, they were right calls. And you know what I mean? So it just happens. Look at the World Series Game 7 last night. There's going to be mixed emotions. There's going to be debate on every play that happens, but certainly not because it was in England. It was a good game of hockey, and it was surely entertaining for everyone involved.
Now, after scoring that actual one that won the game, did you kind of wait, hang on, let's not get too excited yet. This one might get turned over.
I wasn't wait, but it was certainly a different reaction to the first one. Like I was spent emotionally. I was just spent, and you think you win a championship, you're going to be going crazy. But I was just like, I remember just like leaning on the bench in front of me, and I was just like, wow, thank God that's over. But it had been a long time for me personally too. As a coach, it was my first one as a coach, so just a bit of a mixed emotion. But yeah, I know it was awesome feeling.
I want to talk about that because I was, of course, very intrigued watching your career. For those that don't know, Stewie and I both from the same hometown, played a little hockey together as lads with Noral Toyota, which a picture I recently shared with you. So, kind of following you throughout your career. And one of the exciting parts for me is when you did your Reg Dunlop impression and did player coach. And that's something, as a guy who coached, junior hockey, I always said one of the hardest things to do was to tell a player, this is what I want you to go out and do, and then having to sit from the bench and watch if they can execute that. But doing that on a more cellular level where you're actually able to go out and show them how it's done. I mean, was that a transition for you? Like, was it a smart one in hindsight?
In hindsight, yeah. At the time, I would have said no. But I just finished 4 years in Coventry, and we'd won it 3 out of 4 years. Just a dynasty there in Coventry, and I kind of hit 30, and I had a bad couple of years with concussions. I think I had like 5 in 2 years. I was touching 30, and I think Newcastle had approached my coach at the time, Paul Thompson, who's now in Cardiff, and asking if I would consider a player coaching job. It was a lower budget team that was looking for a player just to cut some salary and to come and coach. And so I looked into that, and I took the job. And within 2 weeks of taking the job, their deal with the arena fell through. And so they had to play out of this. Again, got to watch what I say, but I mean, tough barn in Whitley Bay, up north outside of Newcastle. And wow, that was a year. I'm talking, if I wrote a book about that year and the next one, I could be a top selling author. It was like Slapshot. We had our owner left after long story short, there was plans for a new arena. New owner came in, bought the team, was willing to eat, some money for a couple of years to get to the new arena. That deal fell through. And then once he realized that wasn't going to happen, he pulled out. So we ran about 5-6 months of the season with no ownership. And my GM, Jamie Longmire, is a close friend of mine to this day. He ran the team. I mean, we were down to like 13 players at one point. We were getting thumped, and then we were turning teams over somehow. And then we got, other teams were doing jersey raffles for us to get us through to the end of the year. It was crazy, absolutely crazy. But the amount that I learned in that year dealing with that was a lifetime of education. It was, I was a younger guy full of piss and vinegar, as you know, and that matured me quick. And so in hindsight, it was probably the best thing for me.
I think, at least from my recollection, Theo Fleury, when he first signed with the Belfast Giants, that was the first kind of moment where a lot of North American hockey players kind of turned their heads and went and said, oh, there's actually professional hockey over in the UK. And then when you went over as well, it was that moment, I think, that a lot of players have after playing in North America for a period of time, kind of going, okay, am I going to be able to stick it out here much longer, or opportunities elsewhere? Talk about that decision that you made going from Fort Wayne, Indiana, all the way over to overseas.
Well, I was actually in Danbury. So I was Fort Wayne, and then my last year in North America, I got traded to Danbury with the Trashers. And I'd sat down with, as I know you guys know, AJ and Jimmy. I'd agreed to come back the next year. And I remember I was back home in Fort McMurray, and I was staying with my parents for like a few weeks, and I just waddled down to the basement and logged onto the computer, and I'm just, Danbury Trashers sees operations, FBI investigation. And I was like, oh man, here we go. Like I just made the best money of my life for sure in the hockey world playing for that team. So, so I had to look to see what was next. And, I got a call from Paul Thompson in Coventry, and just, said, would you be interested to come over? I did a little bit of research, but, I think at the time, and I was never a money-driven guy, but at the time, the pound was like, I think Canadian dollar to the pound was like 2.25 or something like that. So, I think I took 2 days. I spoke to the family and my brothers a little bit, and was like, yeah, let's do it. And came over, and almost 20 years later, I'm still over here.
Yeah, made yourself a family over there too and everything. It looks like, are you officially a citizen over there now too as well?
Yeah, definite leave to remain, but that's more on me. I can go apply for a passport and citizenship now. I just haven't got around to it. So I don't know if there's a little bit of hesitation, like I don't want to accept it or not, but yeah, no, got a beautiful family, 2 little girls. Again, another probably piece that has matured me quick, and probably the best thing for me having a couple girls rather than a couple little boys.
So at this point, when the thought of going to Canada, it's more of a vacation rather than going home, I'm assuming.
You know what? I have to say, yeah, I actually feel like a bit of an imposter when I go back to Canada now. You know, I don't know. It's weird. I'm almost like I won't accept that I'm like British. Like I fight it tooth and nail. Like I meet people now like 20 years, man. You don't even sound British. And I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to keep it real as much as I can. But and then I go home and I just feel like I'm a bit of a little bit of an imposter when I go back now.
You talked about how the league over in the UK has gone through some changes, and you were there through a lot of the growing pains. Talk about where it was to where it is now.
Yeah, so when I first came over, it was a 10 import league. There was a few different teams, like you had Edinburgh, you had Basingstoke, Hull, some teams that maybe weren't well kind of supported, weren't well bankrolled either, and played in kind of tough barns, and ultimately they met their destiny. But 10 imports. Still the quality of the import back then was still really good, but I think because it was 10, maybe the depth of the league wasn't good. When you got to the third lines, the bottom D pairings, the backup goalies, like you started to see a big drop. 15 imports now. And most teams carry an extra one or two. So when you hit a couple injuries, you're filling that lineup back up with good, not just depth, but quality depth. So, and the reputation, the money's gotten better. How the league's run's gotten better. The teams are doing things the right way. Obviously we mentioned the player coach, and that's done. There's none of that anymore. That's history. So, just all together, teams got better resources in terms of physio teams and equipment managers and, all that stuff. The travel's better, where guys stay in hotels, and the pay has gotten a lot better. The league's really been well supported. So, everything's kind of gotten way better in every capacity on and off the ice. So yeah, I mean, the standard now is just, tough to compare it, I guess, to a North American league. I think we're somewhat with the coast. I personally, maybe it's biased, I think we're better now. But like for example, Sheffield, I don't know if you guys know about Champions League over here. Mm-hmm. Sheffield last year made it to the quarterfinals of Champions Hockey League. Like you're playing against teams with multi-million-dollar budgets in the Swedish Elite League and the DEL, and they're beating these teams, and they lost in the quarterfinal aggregate to Berlin, who's just a different animal. And I think they lost by a goal or something like that, or 2 goals. Belfast this year beat Breenis in the SHL. So, I mean, you don't go in and beat that type of caliber unless you're a good quality yourself.
We saw Wayne Gretzky have the Gretzky effect with the Austin Matthews. You know what I mean? As far as having that impact down in the South, is it fair to say that we're starting to see the Danny Stewart effect over in the UK? Are we seeing a better young program with a bunch of kids playing hockey over there?
I wish I could say yes, but yeah, I don't think it's me that's changed the course of this league.
Is there a lot more kid hockey and youth hockey going on in the UK though?
Yeah, I think so, and I think they're doing their best to try and improve it. The only problem with the UK is the lack of ice rinks. There's a big debate over here about what's holding British ice hockey back. And, sometimes people want to blame our league that we're too import heavy and we're not giving the British guys opportunity to come through. Some want to blame, the youth coaching. Some want to blame. For me, it's just there's lack of ice time for these kids. There's not enough rinks. Depending where you are, if you're in a place like Nottingham or Sheffield, these kids are getting on 3-4 times a week, which is okay. But, if you're out in the stick somewhere, you might get on once a week for an hour and a half. It's just not enough, and I think what you're seeing now is a lot of kids that are getting to that 14, 15, 16 years old. They're starting to head over to North America, and because they're the best here, and then they get over there and they're like, Jesus, I'm not very good. So it's tough. For me, I think there's just got to be more resources into ice rinks, and I keep saying ice rinks. See, that's a British thing too, right? Like that's just unbelievable.
What other kind of rink is there?
But yeah, I think everyone's they're doing their best, and, you got a lot of good people that are trying to maximize, youth hockey. But unless these kids are getting on the ice more, I don't see a solution.
Do you know how many rinks there are in the UK if you were to ballpark it?
Oh boy.
A couple dozen, couple hundred?
There's definitely less than 100.
Really?
Yeah. It's I don't know exactly. I'd maybe say somewhere between 40, 70, somewhere in that range. Which is surprising because it's our league, it's the most watched indoor sport in the country. And in terms of attendances, like our league's starting to climb up there throughout Europe. You get Sheffield that average about 8,000 a night.
Wow.
We average about just over 6,000. Belfast is 65 to 7. Glasgow fills their barn quite regularly. They're just under 4. So you're getting some good attendances, and it's well supported at our league. But after that, it just drops right off.
Not to impugn the work that you guys have done, but you're almost tenfold in the amount of fans we had in Motor City coming out to our games.
Motor City.
It's dressed like a seat.
Yeah.
Even the seats didn't want to be there.
Yeah, no, I played a couple games in Motor. I mean, back in the UHL days when the 2000, what year was it? 2004, was that the lockout?
0405, yeah.
Motor City Mechanics. They had Chilios and Hatcher, and they were all playing for them.
Mm-hmm.
Smolinski and I think Avery played a few games for them too that year, and I enjoyed trips to Motor City.
Can we talk about your time in Fort Wayne for a sec, or do you want to continue on with the UK stuff for a minute?
No, go for it.
I'm curious about your time in Fort Wayne, those two, because you mentioned the legend himself, his reputation proceeds. AJ Galante, Jimmy Galante, and the Trashers, the rivalry between Fort Wayne and Danbury back in the day, I know was very legendary. You spent many years in Fort Wayne, and then you signed in Danbury. Can you kind of take us through that rivalry with the Trashers and then coming over there? Or at least signing?
Well, if I'm being honest, Travis, that was 2003 to 2005, 6. I wouldn't say we had a big rivalry with them then, because at the time they experimented a little bit with like an Eastern division and a Western division. So we only actually played Danbury a couple times a year. And it was obviously just the 1 year, their first year, Danbury. We only played them a couple times. And then the next year I got traded there. So I didn't really sense a big rivalry then, but going from Fort Wayne to Danbury it was tough at first. I mean, I was a Comet through and through, man. Like I went there in my rookie year, and that place, what a place to play. It's nothing bad to say about anyone there or the organization. It was just phenomenal. And start of my third year, we kind of stumbled out of the gates a little bit. And I had, probably a little bit of, I got to be self-accountable here. I had a couple off-ice incidents that probably didn't go in my favor. So in that third year, I think I ended up getting traded for a couple D-men. Danbury, I think AJ called Fort Wayne, said, I think they stumbled a little bit too in year 2, because there was big expectations in Danbury, as you guys know with the money being spent there. And I think they were like 5-5. So they traded for me, and I went there, and a little upset at first, but once I got to know Jimmy and AJ and really kind of get a sense of what the identity was there, man, I loved it there. It was phenomenal.
What was that like? What was that identity? What was that culture that you felt? Because the documentaries make it look really intense and kick-ass. I'm curious about your experience.
Family. It was like AJ and Jimmy had this incredible way of just making you feel like you were a family. You know what I mean? Like you were almost, I hope we don't get in trouble with this. You almost felt like you were part of the mafia. You know what I mean? Like it was awesome. And don't get me wrong, there was pressure. There was definitely pressure there. There was some expectations, and the way the dressing room was in Danbury, like you'd walk, and it was a phenomenal facility. Jimmy built it up, and you'd walk out of the room, and then as you walk towards the weight room, AJ had his office and Jimmy had his office. I mean, they weren't in there day to day, but during games they'd be in there. And so whenever you lost a game, you'd be walking by that office. Jimmy was in there, so you'd tiptoe and past that office. And they had that press, especially Jimmy. AJ was a bit younger, and he was kind of we loved AJ, but Jimmy, man, his presence was just enough. And, that kept you in check for sure.
Definitely more like a mafia boss from the few interviews that he has done with AJ on his podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you definitely got that sense. I remember we got to playoffs that year, and the two Almacholi brothers there, Drew and Mike, good friends to this day. And I think Mike had a couple off nights, and then I think he lost his shit one night. And I think Paul Gillis was our head coach at the time, and I think he was going to healthy scratch him for the next game. And I was only a third-year pro, but I remember having that chat with him, and I remember going to him and saying, I said, well, put him with me. We were stacked that year. I mean, we had something like 5,000 American League games that year, and I was playing third line most of the year. And I remember telling him, I was like, put him with me, and I'll it's scary thinking back to that now. And I was saying I'll keep them in check, because they'll tell you, the opposite, where I was a couple screws loose. But I remember Jimmy called us in before, I want to say it was game 6 against Quad City. And he just sat us down. We sat down, and he was just quiet. I no word of a lie. There's the one video with his boots up on the desk. He was sitting like that, boots up on the desk. And he said, so Gilly tells me you guys want to play together next game. We were just like, yeah, we're just kind of, yeah, we thought it'd be. And he looked at us like there was probably 5 seconds of silence. And he goes, be careful what you wish for. And he never said another word. And we kind of sat there, and we just said, okay. We got up, walked out, and we walked out. And I remember turning those two. I said, hey, we gotta be good tonight, boys. I don't want to end up in cement boots in the Hudson River tonight. So let's go.
A lot of the things that you experienced in the U-Haul, as you call it, the UHL, and then moving over to play in the UK. As far as the things that you liked and that you took over, do you see the league the way it transitioned, kind of avoiding a lot of mistakes that league made and some of the other leagues that you played in, as far as the East Coast and the way they kind of modeled themselves?
Yeah, I think so. They're a little bit different animals in the sense that this league is, it essentially it's ran by the owners, right? So they try to maximize what's best for each individual team, and you're never going to get it perfect. So, things like travel and games, and, every team needs a home gate almost every week, just, for cash flow purposes and stuff like that. And I think teams for the most part now are staying within their means as well. It's the support has grown. So now, teams are able to provide more resources and stuff. Whereas I think back in the UHL days, you had some big clubs like Fort Wayne, and then when Danbury came in and they were spending a fortune, and, Muskegon and, places like that were spending. And then you had the rest of the teams were trying to keep up as best they could. And I think maybe especially when Danbury came in and started kind of going over the top with spending, teams tried to keep up. And just, I think that year, it was like 5 teams went bust or folded. And that was the demise of the United League. Because at that point, it had become such a good league, because I think 2 or 3 years before, the East Coast said it was the first year they kind of limited their veterans to 4. And then everyone jumped ship over to the United League. And, the United League was paying good money at the time. And United League had kind of gone from just a complete shit show in terms of just like, almost like old school Quebec senior hockey to, actually becoming a good league, mixed in with still, each team still had 2-3 heavyweight guys and a couple middleweights. And, there was that, but the quality of hockey had gone really good. But I think they went too far. They were paying guys too much money, and it wasn't sustainable. And ultimately it folded.
Could I just so I understand, because you got to keep in mind back at this time I was almost in diapers still, not to date the both of you.
Yeah.
But so there's the U-Haul, the United Hockey League. The East Coast is around. Yeah. It's somewhat similar, and then where is it stacking up at this time? So
I think the East Coast had more affiliates with the American League and stuff, and was maybe seen as the higher level. But that started to change once they made that veteran rule, because guys played longer back in those days than they do now, right? I think you had a lot more blue collar guys that had came from blue collar families and, parents were tradesmen and stuff like that. Now all of these guys are doctors and lawyers and stuff like that. So I don't think they play as long, but, there was more veterans back in those days. So I think you had the East Coast League, you had the United League, and then you had the Central League that were kind of all seen as maybe somewhat on par. You could argue maybe the Coast was a little bit better. United League then maybe than the Central League. But like I said, when there was that 4 vet rule in the Coast, I think you started to see a bit of a shift. And then when the United League folded, they tried I think, what did they call it? The new EIHL or something for a couple of years, and that didn't really work out. And then Fort Wayne went to the Coast. I think Kalamazoo went to the Coast. Quad City, I think, tried the American League for a couple of years, maybe, if I get the timeline right, and then came back down. And then, then ultimately those leagues went. Then everything kind of became the East Coast League. And I think back in those days, there was also the what did they call it? They trialed like a WHA, which is similar to like the SPHL.
Mm-hmm.
There was something like that, but, it didn't last.
So the UHL and the East Coast were competing basically at the same time, same level. Very similar.
Competing for players, yeah, for sure. We never played against each other, but yeah, certainly competing for players. You saw a lot of movement between the two leagues.
Well, walk me through now how your scouting works in comparison to, if you're looking over into Europe more, if you're looking more into North America, and what does your training camp look like as far as the stack of players and where they're from?
Well, we're more North American heavy. I think probably because you see more. I want to say we're all North American coaches, bar maybe there's British coach in Cardiff. But after that, I think it's all North American coaches. So, naturally, I think you see them, reaching out to their resources, their contacts. But, with all the software we got these days, things like Instat and stuff like that, you can pick any player you want and bring up their name and click on a button. You watch all their shifts. It's a lot easier. Whereas I think maybe when I first started coaching, it was a lot more word of mouth and things like that. And that's still important. Don't get me wrong. You can't get everything you need off video, but we look a bit of everywhere. We're still looking throughout Europe. We got a Hungarian, we've got a Swede, we've got last year we had a couple Finns. So kind of a bit of everywhere. We try to, I think, because our league's gotten better and because our league is paying a lot better money, we're trying to get guys from the Austrian league that maybe didn't have their best year and aren't moving up anymore. We're still looking at guys maybe tailing off in the American league that are maybe at the end of their stint there. But I'd say probably generally most of the recruiting we're doing are East Coast League, college, a little bit of major junior. But I'd say that, we try to spread it out everywhere, but that's probably the majority of where recruiting comes is East Coast, college, stuff like that.
I'm assuming the lack of language barrier is probably part of the pitch.
Yeah, guys do prefer that. Yeah, absolutely. I think they recognize that more when they get here. I think especially guys with families, that's an appeal. But sometimes guys, they got to learn it the hard way. They got to go play their year in Slovakia and see what that's like. And nothing against those leagues, but there's some good parts and bad parts. But look, at the end of the day, I hate to say it, but money's still a big thing for these guys. So, if a Slovakian team's going to come in and offer 20,000 euros more a year, guys forget about the language barrier quick.
Mm-hmm.
What does the average guy make in the UK if you're at a ballpark? And I know, actually, do you guys have a salary cap? Does everybody spend the same?
No. There's a rough gentleman's kind of salary cap. But an average is tough to gauge. You got everything from your bottom end guys to your top end guys. I think top end guys now making some good money, man. 45 to 50,000 pounds a year. So, you're talking 80, 90K net, housing on top, flights on top, visas on top, everything, everything's obviously covered by the club. So, the top end guys are making some good money. In comparison to an American League contract, it'd be like making, 140, 150 a year taxed in Canada, especially in Canada. But, Yeah, no, I on average, I'd say guys now imports probably, maybe 25 to 30 a year.
Did I read that?
Thousand.
Did I agree that you read that you guys negotiated a new TV deal for the league as well?
No TV deal.
So how are you guys? How are you guys getting your games out there?
So each team supplies their own webcast. So there was Premier Sports is owned by the Glasgow owners. So I think they do the odd game on there through that connection. But the problem the league's always had was, I want to say a decade ago, Sky Sports, we had a deal with Sky Sports. So Sky Sports was showing the game. They did a weekly highlight show. But it was the league trying to get their foot in the door with the TV. So I don't think they paid us anything. I think it was just a partnership. And I think when it got to the point where we wanted something, I think they backed out. Now each individual team supplies their own webcast, and I think the teams do quite well from that. So for a TV deal to be made, somebody has to come in and offer really good money. Do you know what I mean? And I think that you could argue, does it hold the league back in terms of exposure? Maybe. But each individual club is going to probably do what's best for themselves. And that's probably prevents it from happening.
You guys give players cars as part of their bonuses or benefits?
Yeah. No, all guys are provided with vehicles. Yeah.
They custom?
Yeah. We try our best. Like, get a couple single guys living together. We'll give their place one car. Some teams do it different. Not everyone's the same, but for the most part, these guys, places are provided, cars are provided, even some places bills are being paid for now. So, it's a good spot.
So you're on the up and up. I mean, there's no doubt about that. If I give you a magic wand right now, Danny Stewart, what are you doing with that magic wand to change your league?
I think add more teams. I think, if we could get a couple cities. I mean, there's some great cities out here like Newcastle and Dublin and, even Edinburgh. Like these places should have teams, right? They should have nice stadiums. They should have teams. And, I think that would be the biggest thing for me, just spreading the league. And through that, I think you would spread the exposure as well.
I'm going to ask you the question. I know it's going to be probably a little bit different than some of the other guys that we've asked, including Jose Theodore, but your first pro contract, your first paycheck, what do you do with it?
Oh, man. It's going to be a different conversation than you had with Jose Theodore there. I'll tell you that right now. I was in Fort Wayne. I think I was making $550 a week or something like that. So it's not going to be if I'm being honest, Wheels, I think I spent it at Travis, you spent a little time in Fort Wayne, didn't you?
Yep.
I think I spent it at Hooters and Showgirls there right by the rink.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think and then I remember I brought my brother's Explorer off him. I think he rinsed me, if I'm being honest. I think I bought it for more than he paid for it. I think he ripped me off a little bit on it. So
for those that don't,
I don't got a sexy story for you.
For those that don't know, Danny comes from a very very talented hockey family, the Stewart family up in Fort McMurray. Bobby and Jay, who both had great careers. Bobby with Maine. I can imagine there's a little bit of pride coming from the youngest boy in the family, going still involved in the game, and good for you. I'm proud of you for that.
Yeah, no. Yeah. We all have our successes in other ways, but when the three of us get together and talk, most of the conversation is still about hockey. So I think because I'm still involved, you know what I mean, they're probably more interested. I feel bad because they're probably more interested in what I'm doing than I am in what they're doing, right? So, but yeah, no, Bobby's happy as pig shit down in Texas. He moved down to Texas a few years ago to get out of Canada, and Jay just recently moved over to Sherwood Park from Beaumont, so still doing well for himself too.
Can I ask you about while we're on the topic of the paychecks for a second, what's the biggest paycheck you got in Danbury, and what's the most unique company that cut you that check? Because I know they were cutting checks from different company names, like a lawnmower.
There was two different types of paychecks, but I think biggest one I got in Danbury was, I remember Jimmy, I was telling you earlier about his office being in the room, right? And we had lost a game to Adirondack one night. It was our biggest rival. And I remember I was walking by and I got about 5 feet past his office and I heard Stewie. And I was like, and I kind of turn around. I go back. He goes, sit down. I go, okay. He goes, you know what? He goes, you're the only guy that gives me 100% every night. So I'm going to bump you up. I'm going to bump you to $12.50 a week. And I was like, okay, thanks, Jimmy. Appreciate it. I walked out and man, I was pumped. I remember. And then as a little joke, the next time we got paid, like guy would come in with a big bag and like throw paychecks around as a joke. You know what I mean? And I remember I showed up with this, I showed up with a ski mask on. And, when he called my name, I put it on and I went up and grabbed it and ran away. And guys were like, what are you doing? And I was laughing. I said, highest paid third liner in the league, guys. Highest paid third liner in the league. So, loved it there. And there was bonuses and stuff like that, but still I still wasn't making close to what those Amacholis were making. That's for sure.
So you get bumped up from $12.50. What were you making before that?
He bumped me up to $12.50.
From previously,
so I think I was on $9.50, and then he bumped me up to $12.50. And then I remember sitting down with AJ after the season, and they were gonna. I think it was gonna. I can't remember exactly, like 1,700, something like that, the next year. And so when I saw that on the computer, I was like, "Oh, come on."
With the dollar that time, you could have basically owned the entire country of Canada. 25% raise too.
You're not wrong.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. I'd like to consider us a very unbiased, non-mainstream sports show. Very good personal friend of mine, Jamie Phillips, was on the show and had some special things to say about you and your organization. Being unbiased, I think we got to give you the floor if you'd like to respond and kind of your side of things, my friend.
You know why? I'm not a social media tough guy, but you know what? Jamie's good guy, really good guy. He was a good goalie. I just think maybe got him at the wrong time in his career. I think, and he said a few things himself about, almost feeling checked out. And I'd say the one thing I didn't like was when he said we were a bad team. I mean, we were challenging for the league that year. When COVID shut us down, we were, I think, 3 points off first place. Went on an absolute heater in the second part of the year. We didn't make a lot of change. And the UK, one of the challenges in the UK is certainly as a coach is, maybe different for the coach from the like complete opposite to maybe the East Coast League is, I have a good friend that's head coach in Bakersfield, Colin Chalk, and he was in Brampton one year. And I think they went through like 75 players one year or something like that. We're kind of the opposite here in the UK. We get 4 additional cards. So you build your team. It's almost like, hey, this is your team, like make it work. So you get a couple bad apples or a couple guys not, you got to find a way to get the best out of them and keep your group motivated, keep your group, there's no keeping them motivated by threatening jobs or guys coming up and down. So you got to really manage your group really, really good. So, but yeah, no, Jamie, we weren't doing great as a team by the time he had left, but I just felt we were just a goal or two off. We made the decision to let Jamie go, and then we brought in CJ Motts, and who was phenomenal for us. But I don't got a bad thing to say about Jamie. He was a good guy, good professional. He was a good goalie. Maybe just got him at the wrong time in his career. And I think the story about the equipment manager was a little bit not untrue. It wasn't that the ownership was scared or cowards. I was the coach and director of hockey ops, so it was my job to handle those situations. Now, knowing what we knew, we were a bit of a smaller budget team at Coventry, and I think what the party missed out is that his brand new pads had just arrived. I think it was like that week, and I didn't like it. That was a bit of a team rule, but the proper story is that kind of negotiated to him. I think what we ended up doing was saying, because we held back, I think 2 weeks pay at the start until we cleaned up, the season or whatever, and then we'd send it to the guys. So I remember saying to him, like, we'll keep 1 week's pay and you can take your stuff. And I think we agreed to that in the end. It wasn't because I'm still close to the equipment manager now, and he was kind of rattled. He called me the next day. He's like, "Have you heard this fucking podcast?" I was like, No. So when I listened to it, I was like, I kind of threw him under the bus a little bit, and he, that's the story I remember that, and I understood why Jamie was upset. And perfect world, I'd love to just be like, hey, we gotta let you go, take all your stuff, see you later. You burned that. But unfortunately, at that club, it wasn't the case. But I think it was more that way how it properly went. But like I said, it's I didn't like how he said we were a bad team, because we weren't. Like, if we finished the year out of playoffs or ninth place or whatever, then I wouldn't comment on it. But we had a good team that year.
I was going to say, the one team you mentioned with the 75 guys in one season, that's almost a higher talent turnover rate than the Hooters in Fort Wayne.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the challenge those coaches have in the East Coast League, right? With call-ups and guys coming down and stuff like that. So yeah, I remember at Brampton, it was crazy. I remember sitting down with Colin Chalk one summer and just talking to him about it. I new guy in the lineup almost every single night, having to get him up to speed. So different challenges in different ways.
You also had another guest of ours, or I guess of the show, on your team, Matt Hackett, goaltender, about 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, no, Hackett. We'd had a bit of a tough time with goalies that year. We started with Mika Wickman. He broke his hand right at the start of the year. And we brought in Slovakian guy goalie who came in at the start and was good for us. And then a scary incident in Cardiff, and we thought he broke his neck. He got stretchered off, and then what else happened? Initially we had signed Kevin Nastiuk as our goalie coming back from the year before, but due to personal reasons, he pulled out like a week before camp. Then we got Wickman. Then we got the Slovakian kid. And then I think Matt Hackett came in with about 2-3 months left in the season. And tough first night, man. And not on him either. We went into Guildford, which is a tough place to go. So it was his first game, and I think it was 4. He gave up 4 in the first 12 minutes, and I had to get him out of there just to protect him a little bit. But he came good, though. He ended up playing pretty well for us. We ended up playing Belfast in playoffs that year, and we didn't really play that well in front of him. I don't think he had his best nights. And then we decided to just kind of start fresh the year after. And trying to remember it, I think I was talking about our goalie situation on either a podcast or on one of our maybe our team interviews or something. And I think I said something along the lines of, we had a tough year with our goaltending. And what I meant by it was that, we went through 4 different guys, which over here is a lot. Guys were injured. We didn't have any continuity with it. And I think he took it as a personal dig. And I want to say he took a pop at me on social media or something like that, but I'm not too concerned about that, if I'm being honest. But Matt he was a good guy. You know what I mean? I got, again, nothing bad to say about him. Good guy, good person, good goalie.
Obviously, staffing a bit of an issue with the proximity of you guys and teams being close. Do you see a day down the road eventually where the league grows to the point where you have an affiliate system, relegation, promotion, all that kind of thing? Do you see the league going in that direction?
No, to be honest, no, because I think the lack of ice rinks, and the league below us is privately owned too. So those clubs are privately owned. So they're running it like a business, you know what I mean? So, we do some two-way contracts like in that league, but the problem is we don't have control over those guys. So we'll agree to do a two-way. A guy will come up and maybe practice with us once in a while to help develop them. But then say on a Saturday, I got 2 guys go down with injuries and I need a guy on the Sunday. I'll call them and say, hey, can I get this guy? And they're like, sorry, we got a big game tonight.
Right.
So you don't have control over it, right? So I think the league is a long, long ways away from having any type of two-way system that's, in control of the clubs and the clubs in our league, resourcing those teams as well.
Wow. I've learned so much. I don't know about you. I've learned so much about the UK league and also Danny Sharp's attack, name dropping this is the season, this when that happened.
Hey, you never know. The guy had a few conkies in his day, huh?
Imagine if he didn't.
Well, until I fumble my words in a pregame speech, then you'll know it's. I've had a few.
Give us a quick preview on what you're expecting out of your boys this year in Nottingham.
Expecting a lot. We got loads of talent. We got Chase Pearson. We signed Chase Pearson this year. I think he's only 3 years removed from being in Detroit for a handful of games. We got some really good players back from last year's team, and Matt Alfaro, Mitch Fossier, Tim Doherty, Cooper Zach. We brought Jason Grande back, a goalie who just ended up being an absolute sleeper. I mean, we signed Jason. So we had Ryan Bednard last year, who was an absolute stud of a goalie. By the way, I know, Trav, I know you like your goalies, but and he took an injury around January, and we had just brought Grande in because we had Hunter Gorva that was in Kalamazoo, and he had a family illness, so he had to go back home, unfortunately. So we brought Jason Grande in, who had been in Slovakia in a tough situation, and brought him in. And first couple of weeks, he was finding his feet, and then Bednard got hurt. So we gave the net to Jason, and his numbers are just phenomenal to the end of the year. So we were able to bring him back, and we brought Kevin Carr in, who's a veteran goalie who's played at some good levels and a really good goalie. And Kevin's been phenomenal for us. Jason starting to find his feet, but just recently picked up an injury. I think combined with us in front of him, maybe not being sharp, his numbers maybe weren't there compared to last year, but he's a phenomenal goalie, and I know he'll come good. I think the expectations for us is the challenge for everything this year, and as maybe you don't, well, there are 3 main trophies here that we compete for. They follow the model of soccer, right? Football, the Premiership. So the league championship's the big one, and then the playoffs, and then they do a Challenge Cup competition, almost like FA Cup or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So they're all competitive, man, and we're also playing in a European tournament called the Continental Cup this year because we won the playoffs last year.
Well, best of luck, man. Trav, I can tell you, growing up in Fort McMurray, and Danny can tell you, we had a lot of talent, like amazing amount of talent that I remember playing hockey as a youth up there, and seeing Danny and his success all the way through, all the way over to the UK. We miss him in North America, but we're really proud of all your success, man. Truthfully.
Well, I appreciate that, Wills. I do. And hey, same back to you, man. I mean, you're probably more successful than I am.
Well, it's debatable. Yeah. I'm sure we could trade spots in a heartbeat and still do okay.
Hey, humble pie. Ain't nothing wrong with a little humble pie.
Take him out, Trev.
Got a little more of a hairline, but
I lost it years ago, man. I'll tell you a funny story. And the first time I shaved it, so I remember in Fort Wayne. You guys will like this, actually. In Fort Wayne, I was starting to go a little bit thin, right? So I remember I used to go into a hairdresser's there, and there's 3 or 4 women in there. They used to have their giggles and on my behalf, and they convinced me to do highlights, right, to make it look thicker. So I was like, I don't know, man. I can't be from Fort Mac, Alberta, and have highlights in my hair, right? But anyway, they convinced me to do it real subtle, and somehow they convinced me it worked. So I remember, and then I got traded to Danbury, and then in the summer before I came to the UK, I don't know what I was thinking, man. I went to like Shoppers Drug Mart, and I got this like hair dye kit to dye my hair like a subtle color, I don't know what I was thinking. And this is like, if you knew me now, I'm the furthest thing from this. And I look like Eminem going over. So I get over to the UK, and I look like Eminem, man. The guys are calling me Eminem first week or two. And then I get over here, and I realize like half the country have shaved heads. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to shave my head. And I have never grown it back since, not once. So like that was 26 years old, I think.
Looks good on you.
How often you topping that up, by the way?
I'm usually a little bit more sharper. Yeah, I just recently got one of those skull shavers. So things aren't unbelievable. So now I do it a lot more frequently now that I have that.
You still look youthful, sir.
I appreciate it. I don't know how. I think probably the only way I do, if you're being honest, is I started late in the game with kids. Right? So
you want to get into that just real quick before we cap off?
Absolutely. You can get into whatever you guys want.
In this week's episode of Helping Trav Find Love and talking women, dating, culture, and everything in between, when did you start having kids? At what age?
I had my firstborn at 37.
Okay. And how many do you have
So
now?
Isabel just turned 10. So
How many do you have now?
2.
Okay. As
2 girls.
a much more seasoned gentleman and understanding that it's significantly easier to learn from the mistakes of others than doing it yourself, at 29 years young, looking to find a good woman who's a good integration into my life and the characteristics of a good mother, what advice would you give me to navigate this very fascinating dating market of talent?
Well, I'll focus on the first thing you said. Good woman.
Mm-hmm.
What characteristics would you tell me to focus on for that?
Well, I think they got to share the same principles as you. Maybe not exactly to the T, but
It would be tough to deal with.
I don't think you want a female version of yourself, do you?
Well, I actually, not to be too arrogant, I had this thought the other day. I thought, wouldn't it be nice if I could like just date myself? But then I could never get kids out of myself, so I needed to be a female. But then what kind of female is going to think can be the way that I am?
And you wonder why he has a problem.
Yeah, look, I'm not. I'm probably not the right guy to ask. I mean, I'm not. What's the one movie with Will Smith? What is he there when he's setting guys up?
Oh, Hitch.
Setting women up.
It's like,
What's that?
Hitch.
Yeah, I can't. But look, I've been fortunate, man. I got a good woman. It's same type of morals, principles as me. Probably a little more calm than me as well. So that kind of balanced me out a little bit, and a bit of a game changer. So yeah. I'm like I said, I'm not
He's a
probably the
hockey
best
coach,
guy
for
to
Christ's
ask.
sake. He's a hockey coach, not a life coach.
Well, look, put it this way. If you're swiping left every day, you're probably not going to find the right woman.
Trying to find some talent in public. I'm having more success, but not the success that I'm looking for quite yet. But I am playing a long game, though. Women hit that 30 years old, and it's like, oh boy, the lights have come on in the club. We got to find somebody before we go home. I'm turning 30, about to hit my peak. Enjoy my 30s and try to find that gal. Just long game. Long game. Like Jose Theodore said, there's no rush. You got all the time in the world. The odds are in your favor the longer you wait.
When I met my current wife, I had stopped looking. Maybe that's the best advice for you. Stop looking.
What age?
You'll find it.
What age were you when you found her?
I was 20. I was 29, 30. Yeah.
Yeah, I was the same age when I met Candace, and that's exact same advice I gave you. Maybe just, take a break, focus on you, work on you.
I'm in that ballpark,
Yep.
29, 30 ballpark.
There you go.
You know what, Danny? This has been very productive. I think we've made some progress here.
Awesome. I appreciate it.
Take him out.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is Danny Stewart, head coach of the Coventry, formerly the Coventry Blaze, now the Nottingham Panthers in the EIHL, the English Ice Hockey League. There we go. Jesus. 4 a.m. over here. I'm Travis Ridgen. That is Dave Wheeler. That is Danny Stewart. We do new episodes every single Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 in the prairies of Manitoba, 9 a.m. in the foothills of Calgary, 8 in the Pacific Northwest. We'll see you then. Thanks for watching.